She thought it was just a job, a fresh start, a chance to work for one of the most powerful names in music. But by the end of her first day, she was standing in Central Park at night, staring down one of the richest men in hip-hop, and hearing him say that if anything went wrong, he'd have to smash her. That's how Capricorn Clark's journey with Sean Diddy Combs began. What followed was nearly a decade of secrets, threats, paranoia, and what some are now calling the most damning testimony yet in the explosive federal case against the bad boy mogul. We're talking lie detector tests that stretched for days, locked doors, missing diamonds, threats of violence, forced drug deals, and even a gun-toting mission to allegedly harm a rival artist. Now, with racketeering, trafficking, and conspiracy charges hanging over his empire, Diddy's world is crumbling. But it's not just prosecutors or the media turning on him. It's the people who once knew him best. Capricorn Clark was there. She saw it all. And what she told the jury has already shaken the courtroom to its core. But just how far does this go? And is her testimony the key to bringing down one of the most untouchable figures in entertainment? Or is there more to this story than anyone expected? Let's get into it. It was supposed to be a normal first day on the job. Capricorn Clark had just been hired as Sean Diddy Combs' personal assistant, a position most would smash for in the music industry. Power, connections, proximity to fame. She had it all in front of her. But instead of orientation or onboarding paperwork, her introduction to Diddy's world began with something else entirely. A strange walk through Central Park. At night. It was around 9 p.m. when Diddy asked her to take a stroll. That alone was odd. This wasn't a team lunch or a meet and greet. It was just the two of them, away from the cameras, away from the public eye, quiet, isolated, and tense. As they walked, Diddy asked her about her past, where she'd worked, who she'd worked for, and that's when Capricorn made what she didn't realize was a dangerous admission. She had previously worked for Death Row Records, the same label run by Suge Knight, Diddy's longtime rival, both in business and in street reputation. And that's when, according to her sworn testimony, Diddy turned cold. He looked at her and said, "If anything happens, I'd have to smash you." Let that sink in. This wasn't a joke. This wasn't delivered with a laugh or a smirk. Capricorn says he was dead serious. And this wasn't just any boss. This was a man with money, power, influence, and now, a reason to doubt her loyalty. One sentence, and suddenly, her dream job became a nightmare she couldn't wake up from. From that moment on, the tone was set. Capricorn wasn't just working for a music mogul. She was walking on eggshells in a world where suspicion could be lethal, and where every day seemed to tighten the leash around her freedom. And that was only the beginning. Years into her employment, Capricorn Clark thought she had survived the worst of it. The threats, the paranoia, the unspoken rules of loyalty. But then a bag of jewelry went missing, and everything changed. According to Clark's testimony, the incident unleashed a level of suspicion and control that felt more like a hostage situation than a job. Diddy allegedly accused her of stealing the diamonds. No evidence, no questions. Just a brutal assumption. Security locked her in an office. Not once, not twice, but for 5 straight days. There was no police report, no formal HR process. Instead, Capricorn was subjected to what she described as an underground interrogation. Daily lie detector tests, over and over again. The same questions, the same dark room, the same fear. But it wasn't just the pressure of proving her innocence. It was the threat that came with failure. According to her sworn testimony, she was told that if she didn't pass, they would throw her into the East River. Let that sink in. This wasn't a metaphor. She was allegedly told she could die if she failed. No trial, no judge, just a test she didn't consent to, with her life on the line. This wasn't just humiliation. This was psychological warfare, and to legal experts watching the case, it wasn't just cruel. It was criminal. Kidnapping, intimidation, racketeering, and it was far from over. Because what happened later would take the danger from psychological to potentially deadly. December 2011. Capricorn Clark had seen Diddy angry before, paranoid, even volatile. But nothing could have prepared her for what came next. She was at home when he showed up, unannounced. Not for work, not for business, but, according to her testimony, for something darker. He had a gun and a demand. Get dressed. We're going to smash him. The him Diddy was allegedly referring to? Cassie Ventura's boyfriend at the time, rapper and actor Kid Cudi. Capricorn testified that Diddy had become enraged after learning about Cassie's relationship with Cudi. At the time, Cassie was his ex. And according to multiple witnesses in this case, Diddy never really let her go. He didn't just move on. He watched. He obsessed. And when another man entered the picture, it became personal. Too personal. What followed, according to Capricorn's court account, was an attempted revenge mission, one that crossed all boundaries of jealousy and morality. She didn't say whether they actually found Cudi that night, but Kid Cudi himself later testified that Diddy broke into his home and eventually, possibly weeks later, his car mysteriously exploded in his driveway. No one was ever arrested. No charges were filed. But the story, now under oath in federal court, paints a haunting picture of Diddy's mindset during those years. This wasn't the behavior of a scorned lover. This was obsession, possession, control, and perhaps, Capricorn feared, something far more dangerous. If Capricorn Clark's early testimony painted a picture of fear and control, this part of the story peeled back the curtain on something even darker: criminal enterprise. According to her sworn statements, Diddy didn't just expect loyalty, he expected complicity. Capricorn claimed she was regularly ordered to pick up prescription medication, not for herself, but for her boss. The prescriptions were allegedly filled in her name, written out to avoid detection, then handed off to Diddy. Think about what that means. These weren't just errands. This was a system, calculated, hidden, and illegal. To prosecutors, it wasn't just shady behavior. It was drug trafficking, and it's now being cited as a key predicate act in the racketeering case against Diddy. If proven, this moves the story beyond assault, beyond intimidation, into full-blown RICO territory. Because when you combine alleged threats, kidnapping, and drug trafficking under one organization, that's not just misconduct. That's organized crime. And this wasn't a one-off. Capricorn says the drug pickups were part of her routine job duties. No questions asked, no paperwork, just silent compliance. She didn't feel like a personal assistant anymore. She felt like a pawn in something much bigger, something much riskier, and maybe something she'd never truly escape. But despite everything, the defense had one major card to play, and they didn't hesitate to use it. The prosecution had painted Capricorn Clark as a key witness, someone who had lived through Diddy's alleged reign of fear, abuse, and manipulation. But the defense wasn't about to let her testimony go unchecked. They came in hard. First, they pulled out evidence of a wrongful termination settlement. Capricorn had already been paid, so why come back now? Was this really about justice or revenge? Then came the text messages, ones where Capricorn admitted to having a crush on Diddy, ones where she expressed a desire to return to his team, not just in any role, but as his chief of staff. That's not all. She had even met with Diddy just months before the trial, reportedly telling him that Cassie wasn't good for him, and that if he had just kept her around, none of this would have happened. To the defense, this wasn't a victim seeking justice. It was a former employee with bruised ego and unfinished business. They framed her as jealous, opportunistic, desperate to be back in the inner circle, and furious when she wasn't. It was a sharp contrast to the prosecution's image of a traumatized whistleblower. And it worked, to an extent. Because while Capricorn's testimony was undeniably explosive, the defense managed to seed doubt, not about the events themselves, but about her reasons for coming forward. Still, the weight of what she described couldn't be ignored, and her story wasn't happening in isolation. Other voices were coming forward, voices with nothing to gain and everything to lose. And one of them had already shaken the courtroom to its core. Capricorn Clark wasn't the only one speaking out. As the trial continued, the courtroom became a stage for a disturbing series of echoes. Different voices, same story. Cassie Ventura, Diddy's ex-girlfriend, had already shocked the world when she filed a lawsuit alleging years of abuse, manipulation, and coercion. She later settled, but the details she described didn't vanish. In fact, they started showing up again. In other people's testimonies. Her mother, Regina Ventura, testified. So did Carrie Morgan, Cassie's former best friend. Each one described similar behavior. Threats, isolation, violence, always centered around one man. And then there was Kid Cudi. He took the stand and confirmed a detail that had long circulated online, that he had dated Cassie. But what came next was more than gossip. It was explosive. He claimed that after Diddy found out about their relationship, he broke into his home, and sometime later his car mysteriously exploded in his driveway. Was it revenge? Was it coincidence? There was no hard proof linking Diddy to the blast. Just a chilling timeline and a room full of testimonies pointing in one direction. Prosecutors weren't just building a case on isolated incidents. They were showing a pattern, a long trail of fear, control, and retribution, stretching over years and involving multiple people. This wasn't just about jealousy or power trips. This was about a man who, if the allegations hold, used his fame and fortune not just to climb to the top, but to silence, intimidate, and dominate those around him. And Capricorn Clark? She may have been the most explosive testimony yet, but she was far from alone. Sean Diddy Combs once stood as a towering figure in the music world, a mogul, a visionary, an untouchable icon. But now that empire is cracking under the weight of something far more powerful than fame: the truth. The federal charges he's facing aren't minor: racketeering, drug trafficking, coercion. If even a fraction of it holds up in court, Diddy could be looking at 15 years to life in prison. Not just for what he did, but for what his name came to represent. A network of fear, silence, and unchecked power. Capricorn Clark's testimony may have shocked the courtroom, but it's the consistency of stories, from Cassie, from her mother, from Kid Cudi, that gives prosecutors momentum. And in federal court, momentum is everything. Of course, Diddy maintains his innocence. His defense argues these are disgruntled ex-employees and bitter ex-lovers. They say there's no proof, only claims. And maybe that will work. Maybe. But as this trial continues, one thing is becoming clear. This isn't just about one man. It's about an entire culture of silence in the shadows of celebrity. A culture that may finally be unraveling. So what happens next? Will Diddy walk free, his legacy bruised but intact? Or will this be the final chapter in a story that was never as glamorous as it seemed? Only the jury can decide, but the world is watching.